Ready.
Okay, I see we have attendees already joining us today. We're going to kick this event off in about 30 seconds or so. On your screen, as you are joining, you will see a poll question up. Please share 2 to 3 takeaways you hope to gain from today's webinar. This will help kind of guide our Q&A session at the end of today's event. So again, if you're just joining, thank you for being here, and we will be getting started shortly. Thank you for those who are answering the poll question already. Okay. Well, as we have more people join, I want to welcome you to beginning a decarbonization journey. We're going to be talking about renewable energy certificates, using them as an on-ramp today, as well as EACs. We have a wonderful team with us from Enel and Amphenol, and I know you are here to listen to them and not me. So I do want to go over a few housekeeping items with all attendees before I turn the presentation over to our speakers who you see on the screen today. This event, as all events with E&E Leader, will be recorded. So once Zoom has had the chance to archive the event, you will receive a follow-up email and have the ability to watch this event again, share it with colleagues, with anyone else in your network that you feel could benefit from the information that you learned today, because we want to make sure these words and this advice gets to as many individuals as possible. We have set aside time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. If we do not get a chance to answer your specific question before the top of the hour, a member of the team will follow up with you as soon as possible. So please feel free to submit as many questions as you want. I can't guarantee that we will answer it, but we will do our best to get to as many as possible. To do that, please use the Q&A widget that's at the bottom of your screen. Everyone has access to the webinar chat as well. Please let us know where you're joining from, along with answering the opening poll question that is on your screen. I'm going to hand the presentation over to Stephen, and he's going to introduce himself, talk a little bit about the event, and then you will get to meet Julie and Scott. So thank you for being here today. And for those who are watching this on demand, thank you for being a part of the E&E Leader community.
Thanks, Jessica. I'm Stephen Smith. I am a Principal Renewable Energy Advisor here at Enel. I've been with Enel about 3.5 years and have almost 2 decades in the renewable energy space. I'm also a chartered financial analyst, or a CFA. Prior to entering into the renewable space, I was a trade support for OTC derivatives on Wall Street. Fun fact about me is I do have triplets. We have 2 boys and 1 girl, and that we went backpacking, or at least the 2 boys went backpacking this summer with Scouting America to Philmont, where we covered 58 miles over 9 days. Amazing journey. Highly recommend it for anybody that is able to participate in that activity. All right, let's get started here. Beginning a decarbonization journey with RECs or EACs as an on-ramp. But first, let's talk a little bit about Enel. So Enel Advisory Services is a subsidiary of Enel Group, the world's largest utility by market capitalization and the world's largest producer operator of renewable energy. Enel X Advisory Services, we have 450 employees worldwide, over 12 billion in energy spend under management for energy advisory services. This includes 16 million RECs and IRECs transacted across the EU, North America, and APAC regions. We actively manage 1 million decatherms of natural gas and 250 million megawatt hours of electricity. Rome, Italy is our global headquarters, with Andover, Massachusetts as our US regional headquarters. Enel X Advisory Solutions, we like to meet customers where they are in their decarbonization journey. But first, we like to start typically with measure. Measure your energy and sustainability footprint uh, regarding your scope 1, 2, and 3 for tracking and calculation of emissions. Next, we move on to planning. We want to plan and strategize for how you're going to implement your decarbonization journey, typically through roadmaps and stakeholder workshops so that we can prioritize the best solutions for you and your company. Next, which is essentially the focus of this workshop, is implement. We're going to implement your strategies. This is when that roadmap comes to life through energy procurement and REC procurement. Next, we go on to reporting. At Enel Energy Advisory Services, we can help with CDP climate reporting and also other voluntary and mandatory reporting. This is a cyclical cycle and not necessarily followed in all these steps, but then we would go back to measure, plan, implement, and we can skip around between these. First, before we get into the discussion of RECs, we need to understand what RECs are used for and which scopes we have for electricity. So greenhouse gas emission accounting involves 3 scopes: scope 1, 2, and 3. As defined by the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, Scope 1 and 2 concern emissions from assets controlled or owned by the reporting company. Scope 1 emissions are direct emissions, owned or controlled resources such as furnaces, boilers, or fleet vehicles. Scope 2 emissions, which is the primary discussion point about this with RECs, are from indirect emissions from the generation of purchased electricity from the grid. Scope 3 emissions are all other indirect emissions that occur in the value chain, including upstream and downstream activities. Scope 3 includes the manufacturing of a company's raw materials, all the way to the delivering and disposing of final goods. A supply chain's partner's Scope 1 and 2 emissions can be reported as a company's Scope 3 emissions. If you have on-site generation that burns fossil fuels, that is a Scope 1 emission and not a Scope 2, because that's not purchased electricity, you're generating your own electricity. Next, I want to talk about generation sources. This slide comes from the EPA, so it's a fun one to talk about because I think some of these things are maybe miscategorized. Traditionally, most power comes from probably the least beneficial sources, such as natural gas and coal, which are predominant in the United States, along with oil. Here's the one that's probably miscategorized as nuclear. Many tech companies have been in the news for contracting from nuclear energy. This can be from restarting old or retired nuclear power plants to contracting for small modular nuclear reactors. Now, nuclear power, while I don't consider it the least beneficial, is carbon-free, but it's not renewable. The benefit of nuclear, though, is that it's available 24/7 for operation. The next category is more beneficial: large hydro and municipal solid waste. The issues with large hydropower plants is typically that there's some environmental damage done by changing the flow of on rivers and the flooding of different areas. Next comes to the most beneficial area. Typically, under the green power heading here, most people consider wind and solar as the only renewable power, but we also have biomass, geothermal, biogas, and low-impact hydro. Low-impact hydro differs from large impact hydro essentially because they generally have it on smaller rivers with fish ladders and try to allow for the natural flow of water. Energy attribute certificates, EACs, and their role in documenting renewable energy purchases. EAC is a blanket term for RECs, GEOs, and IRECs. One EAC represents the environmental attributes of the electricity produced by a renewable generator. The EAC owner has the legal right to retire qualified EACs in order to claim Scope 2 greenhouse gas emission reductions. One EAC is created for each megawatt hour of electricity produced. EACs may be purchased in a bundle along with the physical electricity or separately or unbundled, as we're talking about in this webinar. Renewable energy certificates in the world. So in the US and Canada, we call them RECs. But as we move through here, Green E certified is a popular standard in the US and Canada that specifies reporting requirements for technologies in generation, age, and vintage. Typically, the vintage or age is less than 15 years to be eligible for Green E. RECs are other types of certificates from generators that don't meet a certain vintage and technology requirements, are considered potentially of lower quality. Varying terms for EACs in other countries include Europe goes by GOs or guarantees of origin, and international RECs or IRECs in many other countries in the world, including Mexico. Renewable energy generation. RECs are the currency of the renewable energy market. RECs are a market RECs are a market-based instrument representing, RECs are a market-based instrument representing the environmental attributes of the generation, which each have 1 megawatt of renewable energy coming typically from solar or wind resources, can be either self-consumed or on the grid. They also will produce 1 EAC or REC to comply with laws or have voluntary claims. RECs are a market-based instrument representing the environmental attributes of the generation. Each come with unique identification serial numbers, which will denote the type of generation or the fuel type, the project name, project location, project COD, the vintage, essentially when was the energy produced, and the market boundary for which it's applicable. Types of RECs include compliance and voluntary. So compliance RECs are also known as RPS standards. So New England and PJM are typically some of the most common areas that have RPS RECs, which are more valuable than voluntary RECs. Let's focus on material impact by different categories, looking at different sources for sourcing EACs. First, we can build on-site generation. On-site generation typically has the highest material impact for all generation sources and allows you to consume the energy along with receiving the renewable attribute certificate or REC. Secondly, we can go off-site and have either a PPA or a VPPA for our REC purchases. These typically have a very high degree of material impact, especially if it's associated with causing new generation to come online. Certificate purchase agreements have a medium to high degree. This is a longer term purchase, typically from a named asset. Next, we have green retail supply contracts. They vary a lot by suppliers and have to be individually researched in order to understand their impact. And lastly, we have unbundled RECs, which typically are not from a named generator because you don't have the marketing rights to them, but you know which generator it does come from when you do purchase them. They typically have the lower degree of material impact. Let's look at some of the sustainability frameworks for market-based Scope 2 reductions. Many of you may be familiar with Science-Based Targets Initiative, RE100, CDP, and the ISO standards. Typically, RE100 has the most restrictive of the types of generation technology for looking at electrical purchases. whereas they restrict nuclear and have many restrictions depending on some of the other types of technologies being used. All scopes do include wind and solar as the primary renewable generation coming through. RE 100 technical guidance for renewable purchases. Companies transitioning to renewable electricity should strive to make the most impactful procurements possible. Self-generation or procurement from new projects through long-term, direct, or project-specific contracts are central to corporate buyers themselves, driving the transition to zero carbon grids. Where corporate buyers make one-time purchases of unbundled EACs, they can make a preference on choosing the location, the type of technology, the project, or the timing to increase the impact of these purchases. Corporate buyers should engage with suppliers and policymakers to remove barriers to impactful procurement. Otherwise, procure renewable electricity with the highest impact possible where they operate. There's many misperceptions with EACs and RECs. One, RECs are not real, but RECs are the currency of the renewable energy market. They are the only way to demonstrate renewable or carbon-free electricity was consumed. They provide a paper trail providing auditability and make sure that there's no double counting. RECs are not transparent. Each REC has identifiable information, including the generation type, project name, project location, project COD, and vintage, including the market boundary. Buying RECs does not make a real impact. Buying RECs drives the demand for renewable energy. Using a REC is greenwashing. Greenwashing refers to a practice of falsely promoting an organization's environmental efforts or spending more resources to promote the organization as green than are spent on actually to engage environmentally sound practices. Greenwashing is the dissemination of false or deceptive information regarding an organization's environmental strategies, goals, motivations, and actions. The term greenwashing was originally coined by well-known environmentalist Jay Westerveld in 1986. He claimed that the hotel industry was caught in greenwashing when they promoted the false use of reusing towels instead of it being designed as a cost-saving measure. Another well-known greenwashing scandal was Volkswagen when they admitted to cheating emissions by using defect devices to control the software so that it lowered the emissions when the technology determined that it was under a testing scenario. RECs are expensive. No, they're not. Actually, RECs are probably one of the easiest ways and cheapest ways to implement Scope 2 reductions. US RECs are near $2 in the US, and for European geos, just over €1. And lastly, RECs are the same as carbon credits. No, RECs are renewable energy credits are not the same as carbon credits. One REC proves that 1 megawatt hour of electricity was generated as a renewable source, while carbon credits represent 1 metric ton of CO2 equivalent that has been avoided, reduced, or removed from the atmosphere. RECs are primarily used for Scope 2 emission reductions, whereas carbon credits can be used for offsetting Scope 1, 2, and 3. There are many considerations in formalizing goals and strategies. One is understanding your emission reduction ambition. Large emission reductions will require more scalable solutions. But two, we need to understand a company's sustainability story. This is where we like to engage and ask, hey, if you were to have a press release, what would your press release likely, what components would you like it to say? Having one investment or expenditure tied to a specific generation project can strengthen your sustainability story. Material impact is higher when we have long-term or project-specific investments that potentially support new project development. Also need to understand your budget risk. How much can you have for price uncertainty and cash flow variability? This is important when we're looking at VPPAs and/or on-site generation. Contract term length and complexity. When buying spot EACs, those can be purchased from 1 to 3 years typically, or we can go into CPAs, or those certificate purchase agreements. Those terms range typically from 5 to 10 to 12 to 15 years. And then we also have VPPAs or PPAs that have increased complexity. Implementation speed. How fast do we need to do this? So with changes in the IRA or the Inflation Reduction Act, it's changed the speed at which we need to do RFPs if you're looking for things like VPPAs, whereas most companies need to enter into contracts because the IRA has speeded up the time in which projects need to secure their ability to receive those tax credits. And then lastly, capital expenditure. Typically that is only for ownership case for solar projects. Most of the other products that we have, there's no capital expenditure until the RECs or the project has been operating. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Stephen. I know we have a little bit of a transition before Julie and Scott jump on. So thank you. And we did have quite a few questions that came in during Stephen's part of today's presentation. We're going to answer all of those at the end to make sure we give Julie and Scott enough time.
Thank you, Jessica. Hello, everyone. Thanks for inviting us here today, ENE Leader and NLX. I'm Julie Hoban, and I lead our corporate EHS and sustainability team at Amphenol. When we were preparing for this webinar event, I was asked to share a fun fact about myself, and I'm terrible with sports metaphors. So I dipped back into my earlier days, and I thought it would be fun to share the fact that I taught myself Braille when I was about 10 years old. You know, that inspiration was a little unusual. So I guess you can say that from a fairly early age, I really was going after seeing things that others didn't. And when you combine that with a passion for solving puzzles, I think it adds up to a systems and orthogonal thinking person. So finding myself in a role in sustainability in a company like Amphenol is incredibly stimulating. And it's made even better because of the great people that I get to work with, like Scott, and also the partners that we collaborate with, especially ones like NLX. So, you know, together we learn, we teach each other, we collaborate, and that leads to a lot of activation and some great progress. So I think that's pretty great. And I hope you are inspired by this story too. So before we get to the more detailed information that I know Scott's going to be covering today, I wanted to share a little bit of information about Amphenol and how our company and our sustainability journey have evolved. So starting with our basics, Amphenol is a leading electrical interconnect and sensor technology company with strong financials, we like to think, with very balanced exposure from a sales and geographical standpoint. And we're very broadly based. At the end of last year, we had 125,000 employees worldwide. And we think of all of those Amphenolians around the world as family. It's a formula that allows Amphenol to manage our risks and really maintain our focus in the short, medium, and long-term time horizons. And that's very important to us because, by keeping this perspective, we are able to maintain our ability to stay sustainable, not just in today's moment, but for a long time to come. And that link between sort of our current state and our future state links the connection between sustainability and how it really just informs what we think of as good business. So I've pulled some, I hope, useful information that underpins what we report out in our sustainability report, guided by how our executive leadership team and the entire company think about.
Julie, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but can you put the presentation mode on for PowerPoint? Because we can see the background of PowerPoint now.
Yeah.
Or the whole
Better?
platform. Yes, good to go.
Super. All right, well, moving on. A little bit about our history. For more than 90 years, we've been enabling the electronics revolution, connecting people, powering industries, and supporting the critical technologies that shape our daily lives. In fact, we like to think if you knock on any door around the world, you'll bound to be finding another Amphenolian on the other side of it, as well as opening products that we use in our daily lives. There will be content that is Amphenol created, or we're part of the chain that gets you there. So it's a very ubiquitous type of technology that we're talking about, especially in today's day and age. But our mission today extends far beyond innovation. It's really about corporate responsibility to our planet, to the people, to the communities in which we work and live, and to the future generations who will inherit the products that we're making today, as well as the company that we will have them leading tomorrow. So sustainability, as I said, isn't just a program at Amphenol. It's an integral way of how we operate, how we grow, and how we create long-term value for all of our stakeholders. And as the world accelerates all of our collective actions to reduce carbon emissions and to slow down climate change, we're really part of a generational revolution that's driving pretty significant changes across all of our end markets, which are themselves very diversified. Reducing carbon emissions introduces a lot of need for high-tech content, especially when it comes to electrical interconnect. It's our very own content. And that's throughout the entire energy generation cycle. And while our products are enabling decarbonization around the world and in the market, we're also internally making progress on our own sustainability efforts and goals, including meaningful progress reducing our emissions in the context of some really unprecedented and historic business growth, which poses its own unique challenges, as I'm sure you can imagine. Our success in this achievement is really a reflection of the great partnership that we've had the great good fortune of establishing with NLX over the last several years. And as they've helped us really develop some practical solutions that we can introduce to our teams around the world so that they can increase their share of renewable energy, particularly using the REC program that Stephen was helping us all understand a little bit better. We use those throughout our operations worldwide, and we like to think of that relationship with NLX, as well as any other of our partners with whom we work, as part of what we like to call a virtuous cycle, which feeds from practical, scalable, and integrated solutions for any challenge that we endeavor to meet. And while we face those new challenges, we keep our risks at bay through a very healthy level of diversification. The diversity of our markets, of our products, of the geographies in which we operate, and our workforce itself is really a key pillar of our continued success. And we encourage and embrace that diverse perspective because we feel that that leads to some better long-term outcomes for our business. And it really helps, again, mitigate those risks and keep our impact always very positive. So it's a very simple approach. We're a very practical company, and we want all of the sustainability solutions that we set forth to align with our very entrepreneurial culture, so that everything is working in concert, and that the, again, sustainability organization and the sustainability effort and journey we're on isn't a separate program, but really one and the same as our business journey. And it's that diversity that also demands a very, very practical approach in the context of an incredibly decentralized organizational structure. Just going to take a minute and really reflect on that, because certainly that was one of the unique characteristics that NLX spent good time learning about Amphenol when we began our relationship. Understanding just how decentralized and diverse we are as an organization, particularly in comparison to other organizations our size, which tend to be a bit more centralized, pose some interesting opportunities, as well as the need for just getting to know us so that they could understand how to best partner with us as a collaborative solution provider in the development of more renewable energy across our entire company. We really aren't a one-size-fits-all type of organization, as you can see from a very decentralized and entrepreneurial structure at the core of our sustained success. It really is a differentiator in the market. It's a competitive advantage, we feel, and it truly is part of the DNA of the entire company, because we feel that this diversification and this decentralization and this truly entrepreneurial DNA that we all carry inside of us creates an environment where our general managers, our business leaders, are directly linked to the success of their individual businesses. And we're 140 and counting across the organization at this point, because it gives them a more personal connection to their teams and to the communities in which they operate, as well as to their own unique customer expectations and needs. And our sustainability strategy has developed in this context. This culture, this reflection of the three key principles that we always seek in any solution: pragmatism, making sure that we're developing what's good enough for what is required and not being overly complex when it's unnecessary to be so; a scalable solution so that we can support our continued business growth. And we do grow significantly through acquisition as well as organically. So yesterday's footprint does not look like what we know tomorrow will bring. And really making sure that we have an integrated and harmonized solution, although recognizing our decentralization, because we have a very broad operational footprint, a very broad supply chain, and a very broad product portfolio in each of those 140 plus business units. And, really just to bring everything together, our sustained long-term value creation isn't just about our sales and our operating profit with more products sold in a broader array of markets. For us, it really includes that corporate responsibility, taking actions not only to reduce our carbon footprint, among many other efforts in our sustainability journey, but this is really what underpinned our partnership with NLX, because we couldn't ignore this broad, diversified business situation when we set out to partner with NL and make sure that we were offering a renewable energy solution that would work for the entirety of our company. So, fortunately, NL was very patient with us. They took the time to really understand what it was that we were looking for, how our business is unique, and making sure that the solutions that they helped us develop could be easily adoptable and easily adaptable at the same time as our journey progressed. So, with simple tools and a really strong focus on communicating the benefits of those solutions to our teams around the world, and I know Scott's going to be telling us a little bit more about that in detail, we've really been quite pleased with the over threefold adoption of businesses participating in the NLX REC program that we started out just 18 months ago, with our first really sort of sponsored event that would allow our teams to dip into procurement of renewable energy credits and start to increase their contribution of renewable energy credits and the use of renewable energy within their businesses. And that helped us be able to advance our SDG goals, first by meeting an intensity commitment, and now with our first absolute emission reduction target that we set forth in last year's sustainability report, we're able to really grow that commitment through the use of more renewable energy. And that commitment is satisfying all of the stakeholders around our organization, both internally as well as externally, not the least of which are our key customer base. And as we continue to explore beyond that REC program, because we know RECs are one part of the solution, but there could be other parts of the solution that make sense for each of those 140 businesses and growing. NL continues its collaboration to explore the benefits and impacts of the other solutions that might be viable for us, always keeping in mind our ideals of practicality, scalability, and those integrated solutions that will spell future success, just like they've spelled success in our current REC program. You know, one of the things that we like to say about Amphenol is the one constant is the ever-changing aspect of our business. It's inevitable, and we want it to stay that way. And we know NL is the kind of partner who can help us adapt for not just our current needs today, but for that long-term sustainable future. So again, a little bit about Amphenol, our sustainability journey. It continues to evolve. We take it very slow and steady in a very practical fashion so that we can stay true to our business culture and make sure that what we deliver to our businesses as a corporate team, as well as to our stakeholders, makes sense and is consistent with, again, that business strategy as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott now to help us walk through a few more of the details of the key programs that we've rolled out and just about how we've done it. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you all. So starting off our implementation process, as Julia mentioned, we had set up some global EAC purchasing events, and to be honest, for us, it started off relatively slowly. We had received really what I would call a moderate interest from a number of sites, but hadn't really met what we were hoping for. Some of that was to be attributed to businesses not really having plans to purchase EACs in that first year. Some of it was just really them having a bit of reluctance to work within that program. A number of facilities had started to reach out and purchase EACs on their own. And so in some cases in that first year, we had already had some businesses that had already made those types of plans. So, in order to sort of bolster that initial modest initial growth, what we did as a corporate team was implemented a support corporate purchase. What we were able to do through that is take the original EACs that were purchased by each of our businesses and support those, purchase additional EACs, which still allowed us in that first year to increase our use of renewable energy by 10%, in that initial first year. So that still gave us the outcome we were looking for. And thankfully, the process through NLX gave us that flexibility to allow the businesses to try and make those decisions themselves. And then if they struggled, we were able to step in, sort of anticipate some of those where we were within that process and make some, basically allowed us to pivot and make some initial investments to get the program started and off the ground. We began the process, the EAC process, sort of as a 3-phase sort of program. We started with NLX and more of a tabletop assessment, really kind of working on reviewing our sustainability data, looking at the ownership of our properties as well as the property sizes, and identifying different types of solutions, renewable energy solutions, that would make sense. In many cases, which facilities would lend themselves to possibly some solar installations, and in other cases where we had a lot of leased facilities, what were some other possible solutions in the regions where they existed. So taking that information, we sort of built out regional education webinars that we presented to each of our regions and the GMs and EHS folks in those regions. And through that, NLX was able to provide different renewable energy solutions in each of those areas available to those businesses. Where we found the ability or a beneficial use for solar, we identified those and those businesses and those properties. But for the most part, we focused on the unbundled EAC purchase process because that really allowed us the most flexibility in the initial year. As Stephen and Julie had mentioned, it really allowed us to get into the renewable energy space without signing long-term contracts or having to do a lot of research and fully understand what our next 5 to 10 year consumption levels would be. So it was able to get the businesses started in a very low risk type of process. And then of course that third phase that Julie had alluded to is we started we held one initial global EAC purchase event. That event basically consists of a solicitation email to our businesses that allows them to request quotation for a specific volume of their choice of EACs to be purchased. What that does, though, is it allows, as we get those quotations or those requests for quotations, it allows NLX to go out to the market, bundle the different requests in each of the regions or countries where we're seeing that interest. And the sites benefit from that because they're able to go out and look for or use the scale of Amphenol to be able to get better pricing on those EACs in those higher volume regions or markets. So basically they would come back to us with a quote. The sites would approve those quotes, and then if they decide to move forward with that purchase, NLX really kind of handles the rest of the process through the EAC registration, through the EAC retirement, all of the documentation that goes along with those types of things, and it's all done on behalf of the Amphenol businesses making those purchases. So it's I will say a low burden on the different individual manufacturing sites. And so as we've sort of built this process, we've seen, in our second year, we had a much more enthusiastic response from our businesses in this process. This year, we number one, the businesses understood the schedule of the EAC process. We've had a 3-fold increase in the number of sites participating in the program, and we've had about a 600% increase in the number of EACs purchased through the program in the second year. And that's, I would say, emphasized because we've also had a lot of the businesses who had been going out and purchasing EACs on their own have now actually come in and used the NL EAC purchasing program instead of doing that on their own, because it's just less of a burden. So kind of in summary, we've been very happy, honestly, with the NLX program. Number one, from my standpoint as sustainability manager, and as Julie alluded to, we're a very decentralized company. We consist of many individual businesses all across the world, and as part of that, we measure our sustainability data once a year. And so when we set goals that we're trying to show improvement or increased use of renewable energy, prior to this program, it was very difficult for us to anticipate what those trends and what the renewable energy increases would be on a year-over-year basis. With this program, it gives us that insight. The schedule that we've set up, we have 2 purchase events now each year. And so businesses are number one, businesses can anticipate that schedule. They can either decide to purchase EACs earlier in the year when you might be able to receive slightly better or more favorable prices because it's early in the year and demand hasn't increased. Or they can decide, okay, this is going to be our overall budget for the year, and we're going to spread out that cost over the 2 events that we have across the year. So each business can kind of make that decision on their own, what makes the most sense for their business and how do they want to scale their renewable energy increases. So we've been very pleased with that program. And we're even now seeing, as I said, we had started with the unbundled EAC process, again, because it really it was the easiest, the simplest thing for us to do. As Julie had mentioned, we're a very pragmatic company. We're also working in a very entrepreneurial spirit. So it's on the businesses to make these improvements themselves, understanding what our corporate goals are. And this process allows them to do that. But as we've gone through this program, we have also now started to see the businesses sort of expand what their renewable energy portfolio might look like. We've had a lot of businesses more interested in solar and also interested in things like power purchase agreements. Most of the facilities with solar, they just kind of want to understand some of the more specific details with regards to installation of solar and what that would look like. As far as PPAs, what we've seen is certain businesses are looking for perhaps a more stable or a longer term purchase of renewable energy. They don't want to deal with making purchases annually for all of their renewable energy. Perhaps they want to have a set quantity of energy that they know for the next 5 or 10 years will come in as renewable. And so they're looking at the purchase power agreements to assist with that. And what's been very nice through this partnership is that we've been able to have NLX provide that guidance and that support to those specific businesses that are looking to make some of those additional updates or upgrades to their process. So that was sort of the initial information and renewable energy story that I had to kind of share and just as a kind of a quick overview.
Well, thank you, Scott. And it's wonderful to hear that the partnership with NLX has been extremely positive, and that's good to, to explore for other companies. We do have more questions that have come in than we're going to be able to get to today. So if you have additional questions, even after the fact, after we conclude today's event, there will be a survey that pops up on your screen. So feel free to submit additional information there. But Stephen, I'm going to go back. I'm going to start with you. And this is in relation to one of the slides that you had up earlier. No need to put it up. But what are the most common misconceptions you encounter when advising clients on these credits, like credit procurement, and how do you best address them? So I assume this is part of the initial conversation that you're going to have with potential clients.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. A lot of it goes to the education part, which I think is crucial before we even go into purchasing any renewable product. Understanding the different products that are available, and then also understanding the pros and cons of each one, as there isn't a particular solution that is works best for all. With regards to EACs, I think there's a couple critical things just to understand the market boundaries that you have. Whereas RECs purchased in the United States or Canada are interchangeable within that marketplace. But if we go over to Europe, we have to buy a different instrument, a GEO. If we're going down to Mexico, we need to buy an IREC. Also, certain countries within Europe are not part of the AIB, essentially, where they are exchanged. So the UK, you have to buy UK-specific RECs. If we go over to Poland, you have to buy Polish-specific RECs. So it's very important to understand your geographic boundaries. Next is just to make sure that people actually understand. I've had a lot of conversations with companies like, hey, can I buy a whole bunch of them now at today's prices and just save them to 2030 when my goals kick in? And really the desire through most of the protocols and frameworks that we have is that you need to buy them for the time frame that you're using and reporting your electricity. So that's another important consideration.
Yeah, wonderful. And then Scott, from your perspective, in terms of, working with an LX, did you have any, maybe misconceptions that were debunked or, that you felt more comfortable about after your initial conversations with the company?
What I would say is at first I was concerned with as Stephen was just alluding to, some of the complicated nature of how do we go through and purchase this and make sure that we're purchasing the right thing for each of our facilities. And they have made that process very, very simple. For one of the main benefits that I would say most of our businesses really like is through this program, they're really able to go through and purchase the right EAC that they know will be traceable, that we know will pass, our greenhouse gas protocol auditing programs, because Amphenol is, we're third party assured for our greenhouse gas emissions using a lot of the EACs that NLX is providing and purchasing for us. One of my concerns was that traceability, that documentation, and that is really all taken care of by NLX and their team. We've had different situations in different countries where we've suddenly had regulations change and they've been able to pivot and make sure that those EAC solutions met those requirements. And so we didn't have to be experts in EAC and renewable energy processes in each of these countries where we do business.
Which is beneficial because you have 1,000 other things to do as a sustainability
Yes,
manager.
absolutely.
So it's nice to have that taken off of your plate. Julie, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I would echo, and with regard to Stephen, the comment you made, first it begins with educating. That really is where we started, because it wasn't just educating our business units, it was educating ourselves on what kind of viable solutions could be options for us. And then through that preliminary education of our corporate team, we were able to then unpack that for our businesses around the world. They're not renewable energy experts, they're interconnect experts, and we want them to stay that way. So, we wanted to be able to bring kind of from an internal consultancy standpoint, which is how our operation really runs at a corporate team standpoint for sustainability. Easy plug and play, simple things that were baby steps for sites that weren't ready to go whole hog, and yet provide that scalability for organizations that were ready to make bigger commitments. I think we recognize within Amphenol that patience is really important, understanding how to operate successfully within a very decentralized structure, which I think is one of the questions that was in the panel. How do you deal with that? Well, as Amphenolians, we sort of all understand that. That's rules of the road for operating in any fashion, especially from a corporate team standpoint within our company. So that is the foot we lead with. But then through constant communication, educating, and then just sort of a layered approach of making sure that everyone could hear this message very consistently in as many venues as we could think of, We actually, along the way, created a bi-monthly newsletter that we used as a jumping off platform to communicate key dates and the reasons why and the impact of how it could help be a simple solution. I think we really canvassed a wider audience, not just among our EHS community, but also among the business leadership. And that was really how we broke down some of those barriers so that the business leadership could understand the inherent benefit and ease with which they could kind of really lean in and make this kind of commitment. And every time we have another procurement event, as Scott says, we get a little more uptake. So we know that solution is working.
No, it's wonderful. And to hear how you have really been able to engage stakeholders at various different levels, within your communities. As you say, you're extremely decentralized. So there are a lot of moving parts, and finding a way to disseminate information and make, someone at every level feel like they understand why you are doing what you are doing is key to a successful business. Now, and I know we're running out of time, but let's see, I'm trying to think of which one. And this kind of goes, I guess this can be Stephen as well as, Scott and Julie, and then we'll wrap up. People want to move quickly. They want results, but unless you have accurate data in order to, drive your process and drive, your mission, then it's not really worth it because you're going to be having to go back and fix things. So how did you work with members, on both sides of your team? Or I should just ask, Stephen, how did you help different, members of the Amphenol team when it came to explaining to them, all right, we're going to slow down. We need to, make sure that we do have the accurate data. We make sure we have a plan in place so that we don't have to go back and we don't have to pivot over and over again and make those constant changes. Obviously, we know changes are going to happen. There might be some data that is pulled that you didn't realize that you had that could be a benefit to improving, one specific measure of your organization. And I know I asked a lot right there.
That's okay, Jessica. So one of the key things that Enel really tries to do is we meet our customers where they are in their sustainability journey. So is really understanding where Amphenol was. They were really just starting in their sustainability journey. So explaining the different products, the pros and cons, time to implementation, and figuring out what's going to work best for them. Really, EACs were the on-ramp for Amphenol. That's where they wanted to start, and several of their companies have started to progress a little bit further. They're looking at on-site generation. They're looking at PPAs or longer-term REC purchases. As they're getting comfortable with EACs and what they do for their organization and responding to their own customers' inquiries as to, hey, how are you reducing my scope 3 through the purchase of your products?
No, wonderful. And I do want to give, each of you about a minute or so. It's okay if we go a little bit over, just to kind of give, what is one big takeaway that each of you hopes that our attendees leave with today? And Scott, I'll start with you.
I would say, if having gone through the process, we've been measuring and looking at our energy data for years before we started this process. The EAC process, this unbundled EAC market is a space that's very simple to step into. You can do that honestly very quickly, and it is a very easy space. If you need to get started, this is a great way for you to make an initial step into the renewable energy market with very little risk to your business. You can set a 10% increase, a 5% increase, and you can meet those goals relatively easily. And when I say easily, I mean not overly expensive and through very little burden on the individual businesses.
All right, Stephen, I'm going to jump to you and then I'll let Julie close it out.
Great. I think it's important to pick a renewable energy advisor that you feel comfortable working with. One that is going to take the time and work through the education so that you understand what you're purchasing and what you're getting, and also looking at what your goals are to achieve. So at Enel, we pride in meeting our clients where they are, wherever that is in their sustainability journey.
Wonderful. And Julie, anything left to add before I wrap us up?
Yeah, no, I think that as Scott mentioned, we had spent a fair amount of time really getting our emissions inventory well understood. About the same time we were starting our partnership with NL, we were also starting our assurance process. And I think by having a better command of our energy consumption and our plan for what we would want to convert to renewable, that timing was beneficial because it gave us a little bit more of an accurate picture of what we would be working with. So I would say if you're not yet confident in your energy consumption details and your emissions inventory, maybe that's where you start. And then soon after you get more comfortable with that, having a level of accuracy and sort of data credibility, now you can start to think about how do the REC or other solutions start to fit into that. But I like the fact that we had gotten more comfortable with our data. Had we started a REC process a few years earlier, I think it would have been a bigger challenge. And there would have been too much for our sites to unpack all at once. So making sure we could pace with them in terms of how comfortable they were in terms of sustainability reporting, and then the efforts around improving their sustainability performance made sense.
No, and I know we're over, but that's okay. I think that's one of the wisest pieces of information that I have ever heard from a speaker, which is to be comfortable with your data, because it can be so overwhelming and you have so many different data points, and it's hard to move forward unless you are comfortable with it and understand it and can really have a full grasp of everything that you are trying to track. So thank you for ending with that. But again, if you're still on with us, we appreciate you spending a couple extra minutes with us today. This event will be available on demand. You will be able to come back and watch it. We will have the link online, and that both teams will have the link as well. Julie and Scott and Stephen, thank you for the work that you put into today's event. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and hopefully we get to do it again soon. But at this point, we're going to conclude the webinar, and I hope everyone has a great day.